Hello to everyone. My name is Emma Taylor, and I'm the founder and managing director at Chief Disruptor. Thank you for joining us at this latest Chief Disruptor Forum, Enabling Ethical AI. This is the latest in a series of lively, insightful, and interactive virtual sessions that have been designed to connect industry leaders, practitioners, and thought leaders, tackling the very latest need-to-know disruptive trends, adoptive strategies, use cases, and tools. And you'll be able to see some of our forthcoming activities on the slide now. Please do join us for those. What we'll be doing a little bit later is sharing with you a poll, just if you would like to sign up to any of those forthcoming activities, so that you can enjoy some of the different topics that we'll be covering. And we'll come back to that shortly. In addition, you'll be able to receive some of those recordings and materials for the forums. So for those of you perhaps who are joining us for the first time, Chief Disruptor is the community for disruptive business and technology leaders. Our purpose is to cut through the hype and enable our members to leverage these disruptive trends and technologies through our member-led insight reports, content, and community activities. And if you're not a member already, please do scan the QR code on the screen, or indeed go to chiefdisruptor.com and join us. Today, we're joined by our panel of 4 experts who will be discussing the very latest strategies and best practices to enable you to develop and embed responsible AI governance, compliance, and capabilities. This session is about interactivity, so we encourage you to ask as many questions as you'd like. Today, we have something of a good problem to address. As a testimony to the caliber of our panelists and the size of our topic for discussion, we plan to allow ourselves to overrun this session by up to 15 minutes. In order to accommodate anyone listening who has a hard stop at 2 o'clock or indeed before, we're going to use the chat function briefly halfway through the first hour so we can address any urgent questions, comments, or observations before anyone needs to leave. And you'll be able to catch up on anything you missed through our on-demand version. And of course, there are a number of Chief Disruptor opportunities that are coming up in the near future to continue this important conversation on AI. So we hope you'll enjoy joining us for Chief Disruptor breakfast clubs and other activities that we're running. Just honing in a little bit on AI, we've got a Chief Disruptor breakfast club harnessing the power of AI on Friday, the 22nd of November, and that is running at 8:45 in the morning. Or indeed, please do join us at our next Chief Disruptor Forum, our next interactive webinar, which is looking at delivering tangible results from generative AI, and that's at an enterprise-wide level. Please do join us there. Again, we've kept that on a Friday on the 15th of November from 9 to 10 o'clock. So a couple of things before we get going. First of all, I'm going to ask you to give us an idea of your thoughts on a particular poll that we're running at the moment. And second of all, I'm then going to ask you if you'd like to join us in a number of activities that we've got coming up. So coming to the poll, first of all, please, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Our poll we do every single month, and that is shared in our next edition, in this case, of our Chief Disruptor Insights. And that's our monthly newsletter packed with member insights and takeaways, as well as thought leadership pieces. So the poll, hopefully, that you can see on your screen covers a number of different points. And we'd love to just hear what you feel is the most important principle for ethical AI. Is it transparency, privacy, removing bias, or accountability? And just to highlight, your answer is anonymous. And indeed, please tick one of those. So that's the first thing that we'd love you to do. The second thing, as I said a little bit earlier, is we've got a number of activities that are coming up. And whether you'd like to look at them in more detail on our website, or indeed the titles will give you hopefully enough, please do let us know if you'd like to attend any of our forthcoming activities. There are also going to be recordings, so on demand on the forums, and also supporting materials for those forums. So if you would like to join us, hopefully you can see that coming up on your screen now as well. Please do click all of the activities that you would like to come to. The forums, our interactive webinars, those do have recordings with them if you can't join but would like to get that recording. Please do click if that's the case. We've also got our Chief Disruptor Breakfast Club. Again, that's our virtual roundtable discussions. And we've also got some activities that are in person in London that we're partnering with a number of specialists on. So please do click on those. Quick reminder, we keep everything in the membership free. And indeed, in order to do that, we might have some of our partners suggesting that they'd like to chat to you, should you like to register for any of those activities. And we'll share the privacy policy when we send you over calendar invites. So hopefully we've given you a little bit of a kickstart to what we're going to cover today. This is one of the most important topics. It has been for AI. It has been every time these disruptive technologies have come into the mainstream, and something that many of our members grapple with. So without further ado, let's deep dive into today's forum. If you'd like to post questions throughout today's forums, please use the function on your screens, and we'll answer as many questions as we possibly can. If we don't get to them wherever we can, we'll also come back to outside this forum. So I'd like to welcome our fantastic panel today. We've got 4 panelists here with us. I'm going to come to Ange, and indeed to Alan, to Gaston, and also to Vikas. So Ange, who is the Head of Engineering, Chief Digital and Innovation Officer at NatWest Group, Professor Alan Brown, who amongst other things is the Professor of Digital Economy at the University of Exeter, Gaston, who is the Chief Growth Officer at Oddbox, and has actually spoken for us a number of times at different organizations, and also Dr. Vikas Shah, who is the Chief AI Officer for MarketForce Corp and Hackforce.ai. So thank you all very much for joining us today. By way of introductions, please could you share a brief introduction of yourself and indeed some of the roles that you are currently working on? If I start with Ange, please, over to you.
Sure. Hi there. I'm Ange Johnson-DeVette. I work at NatWest as a head of engineering in our commercial and institutional bank. So I'm looking at engineering topics such as speeding up our release cadence, looking at unit testing, code base, and general automation.
Thank you, Ange, so much. Gaston, let me come to you next.
Hi, everyone. Really looking forward to this panel. I am Gaston. I'm the Chief Growth Officer at Oddbox. Oddbox is the brand that rescues food surplus. So more than 40% of the food worldwide is wasted, and it's one of the most significant contributors to climate change. So what we're doing is we're rescuing fruit and veg that otherwise would be literally thrown away, and we send it to houses all across the UK. I have worked in the past in AI-led organizations. I work in different AI marketing roles at Google, and I have also led marketing for an AI startup called Curia.
Thank you so much, Gaston. Great to see you back. Thank you very much indeed. Alan, over to you, please.
Thank you, Emma. My name's Alan Brown. I'm a professor in digital economy at the University of Exeter. As part of my time, and I run a research center there called the Defense Data Research Center that is funded through the DSTL, Defense Science Technology Lab, and the Ministry of Defense. And it's looking at the use of AI in the defense sector and how AI is changing defense, not just in the sort of the sharp end of the defense world, shooting things out of the sky and so on, but also across the whole of the organization, improving the efficiency, the effectiveness, the way in which the defense community looks at its challenge and its mission. And alongside that, I'm doing other work with other organizations, including in the UK government.
Thank you so much, Alan. And certainly when we ran our RAF Counterintelligence Security Conference last week, or 2 weeks ago, that was certainly coming up very strongly as something that's absolutely critical to the safety of many, many people. Thank you very much indeed. And to Vikas, over to you, please, an introduction.
Yeah, thank you, Emma. I'm with Hackforce.ai and MarketForce Corp as a Chief AI Officer. We are focused on, in a Hackforce, is the penetration testing and how the AI is changing the landscape of the new vulnerabilities and before it occurs. So our focus is to provide the penetration testing driven by AI, and the MarketForce Corp is delivering AI for ROI. So focused on the AI for ROI in terms of marketing strategies and how the marketing dynamics is changing based on the AI. Okay. In past, I did work with IBM Global Services, Knights of Columbus, consecutively for 3 years. It is one of the most ethical company in the world. And my background is consulting as well, Wipro, EY, before I joined the Knights of Columbus.
Thank you so much. So some real powerhouses today, but also years and years of living and breathing this challenge and how we need to look at it in a positive light and what we can do and what we can learn from it. So thank you very much indeed. So let's get stuck in. It's been 18 months since we hosted our live panel debate, AI friend or foe, and developments in AI have moved on with incredible speed in that time, something actually that Alan was saying before this started in terms of the book that he's been writing, how much movement there's been. Today, we are going to be discussing the importance of ethical standards to ensure that the incredible benefits of AI are shared across society and don't compromise societal values, privacy, and security. We're going to touch on some of the issues we know matter to members, including trust, equality, and fairness. And we're going to get up to speed on the latest legal developments in regulatory and indeed other areas, as well as touch on the AI Act. So a lot that we're going to try and cover. We've seen a number of headline-grabbing instances in the media, whether that's the many AI deepfake instances, with some people raising concerns about the potential for electoral disinformation or fraud. But we can see and perhaps start to see, by asking you all to share what you think are the main AI ethical challenges our audience should be concerned about, and any trends that you've witnessed in the last year. This question is to you all, but Ange, can I come to you first, please? I know that when you caught up with Caroline, our Director of Research and Strategic Development, that you mentioned the fact that we can only manage our AI and ML, our machine learning, when we know where it is. Can you explain why that can be difficult? And you're on mute, Ange.
That was clever. I went to a supplier-funded dinner a couple months ago, and I was the only techie in the room, and the supplier was selling an AI solution, which was a software as a service solution, to a bunch of business people. And those business people, I don't think they understood software as a service. They definitely didn't understand the risks associated with AI. And I could see them all just pulling out their credit cards and swiping, "I would like this magic, please." Now, the problem with bringing magic into your firm is that it isn't magic. It's usually a software as a service solution. And those software as a service solutions are often not necessarily known, because the person who's bought it didn't know that it was software as a service, and therefore might not have ticked the right boxes in the procurement process. And then suddenly you've got this software as a service estate in your company that you are unaware of. And I'm aware of 2 companies that found they had more than 50% of their software as a service was unknown to them. They just didn't even know they had it in their book. Now, the reason this is relevant to AI is that most of these software as a service instances have got AI and or ML within them. And it's all hidden from the organization and from the person who purchased it. So very difficult to see if it's transparent, if it's fair, if it's, you know, accommodating for bias, etc. So that's the risk associated with software as a service.
Thank you so much indeed. Can I come to you now, please? When it comes to what you've seen, Alan, where do we need to go? What are you seeing as those challenges?
Well, just picking up on what Ange just said, that we've got a challenge right now, just defining what AI is and where it's taking hold of the organizations in which we're working in. And I think where we are right now is that the review we did of AI in government with the National Audit Office a few months ago, it looked at really only one thread of 3 that I think are really important. The thread it looked at was large, well-defined, what we might call AI programs, facial recognition at the borders, fraud management, those sorts of issues, where it's clear that this is a system in which intelligent-based services are going to be applied, and they can be organized and managed and procured and governed in a way that we understand large digital programs. So we've got that going on right now, where those programs are adopting more AI technology. Is that just like any other program that we've been managing, or is there something different here? What do we need to do? How do we govern? How do we manage? And these ethical questions, of course, are at the heart of those governance issues. The problem is that's only one of 3 types of use. The second one is, I think, as Andrew's touching on, lots of the things we use every day are becoming more AI enabled, whether we like it or not. Whether they're software as a service or they're used on premise, they're embedding new AI capabilities, much of which we don't understand. We don't know how they were designed, trained, managed, what the bias is in the training systems, what their ethical boundaries are. So we're adopting them without asking enough questions about where they come from and how they're used. And then the third one is, because these tools are all around us now, easily accessible through very straightforward user interfaces. I'm talking about ChatGPT and Gemini and Claude and others, but also other technologies, where people are using those in a sort of gray area as workplace technologies that are not necessarily even approved, understood, or supported by the organizations that we work in. So we have a third channel here, which is what we might call a gray area, that some companies are trying to ban, some are trying to organize, some are trying to manage, some are trying to put some boundaries around. But it's a little bit all over the place right now. So the current situation is all three of those are going on at the same time.
Absolutely. And it's that grey area that's so unwieldy, isn't it? Gaston, may I come to you, please?
Yes, I think the first point in general, with every new technology, people worry quite a lot. And I think this has been an issue forever. Like, I still remember reading at university Plato, and how Plato was really worried about people adopting writing systems. So writing nowadays, we don't even think about it as a technology, but Plato was really worried about writing because he thought that people would start forgetting about things. And also, he thought that we would become really bad speakers because we could just rely on writing. So our rhetoric would really become much worse compared to what it was before. So we have always worried about technologies, and rightly so, because I think technologies, in a way, change the way that we perceive and interact with the world. Having said that, I don't think it's a question of becoming now apocalyptic about AI and saying that AI will completely destroy the world. Or, as Plato said 2,000 years ago, like, writing will completely change humanity in a way that, like, people are not going to remember anything. Like, and I think that we can still remember stuff even if we use a writing system. I think the most important element for me when it comes to AI is really thinking about trust, especially from a business perspective. I think in the end, every business relationship is a trust-based relationship. Consumers buy your product or your service because they trust you. They trust that you're going to do something that delivers value to them. And with AI, sometimes those decisions are not going to be human-made. And I think the question that you need to ask yourself as a chief marketing officer, as a CEO, is, do you trust AI to handle those relationships? And if you don't, then don't do it, because for sure you're going to break also the trust of your consumers. And once you break the trust of your consumers, you know that the next thing is probably your business is gone. So that's the question that I would always have. Like, can you trust this new technology to handle relationships that are quite critical for your business?
Thank you so much indeed. And different sectors, industry sectors, are obviously going to need to grapple with that even more than others, and then be bringing regulations on, so it gets even more tricky. I completely understand what you said there. Thank you so much. I know, Vikas, you also talked about a couple of concerns you had from reliability and authenticity in sources that we're using. Could I just ask you to sort of just really go into that a little bit more, please?
Yes. Thank you, Emma. And as Professor Allen said, we have open-ended standards. It's not defined which data we can use, what are the sources, reliable sources, right? Moreover, there are so many new data coming in, and you see the even people are taking it from the Twitter, TikTok, and use this data to build their AI story. Those are unreliable resources, and it is unconsciously doing that, and it's reflecting into their decision making or the automation. So this is a major risk, right? Because you don't have the authenticated or reliable data, and there is no standard around the new data that are coming in. More prominently, the behavioral data. And some of the behavioral data may be PII data, some cannot be classified as a PII data. So there is not a unified mechanism or a standard to identify the new data, which are the PII ones and which are not, right? So our standards are lacking, and they are being delayed because of the review processes and the larger implication perspective.
Thank you so much. And thank you to John Moon, who's posted something in the Q&A, which we'll definitely come back to when we get to that sort of midpoint, so that we can cover that and many other things. So if anyone else would like to put any questions in there, please do put that into the Q&A function. I think all of our panelists can agree that it's hugely relevant to all sectors that we get this right. Alan, I know that in the briefing call before we had this, you felt there was a commonality of issue across all sectors to do with trust and risk and value. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, please?
Yes, certainly. I think the comments that we've been made are important, and Gaston's point about risk is critical, but I think that's just one dimension of the challenges we face. When we start to look at these things, we go back to those old innovation models, which said we're always balancing three things when we're trying to make changes like bring in AI. We're trying to balance feasibility, what's the technology capable of, and how do we understand the technology and the risks of the technology itself. Desirability, what do people want? How do they want to consume things? How do they want to interact with these technologies, and how does it fit into their lifestyles? And there's a set of risks with that. And then there's viability. What do we understand about major issues like legal issues, like some of the broader moral and bias issues that make these things viable in the context in which we're using them? So in situations where I'm working in defense, that's a very different kind of environment than a marketing situation for retail. So you've got these desirability, feasibility, viability issues. You've got the contextual challenge that you face, and then you've got risk being dealt with the kinds of other pressures you face. Trust was mentioned as a key one, but also we've got this idea of what do we value? What do we think our clients value? What do we think is important for us in terms of priorities? And we put this all into the mix, and we have to come up as leaders, as people responsible for delivering something as part of an organization or as part of a group. We have to come up with some sort of solution for our strategy that brings these together. And I think it's that combination that causes the challenges and causes the issues. In abstract, any of these, what we might call ethical issues, seem to be solvable in isolation. But together, this mix is an incredibly difficult cocktail.
Thank you very much. And I think just building on that, Gaston, you've worked in two vastly different industries recently and faced a number of different ethical dilemmas. Can you bring that to life a little bit more in terms of the breadth of the impact of AI on sectors?
Yes, and I think it impacts definitely every single sector. Actually, one dilemma I faced was when I was CMO at Badoo Group. Badoo Group is now called Bumble Group. It's a group of dating apps. I'm sure there's people in the audience who have, at a certain point, used the dating app. And Bumble, Badoo are some of the leading dating apps in the industry. One issue that we face when we were thinking about how to drive more engagement in the app is how do you do the presentation of new potential matches to a user? So we know from data that people are more likely to match with someone from their same ethnicity. So people from a certain ethnicity are more likely to match with someone from their own ethnicity. If you leave the AI and machine learning algorithm to do basically the optimization of what kind of profiles they present to a certain user, they will reinforce that bias. So humans are already biased. It's not that the AI is bringing a new bias. What the AI is doing is just amplifying, giving more scale to that bias. And it will definitely reinforce that natural bias of just selecting people from your own ethnicity. So those were very interesting ethical discussions that we had when I was in that company around what should we do with our AI to present potential new matches to users. Should we just basically leave the data run that algorithm, which will reinforce just this selection bias that we have, or should we try to impose our own algorithm, which is not necessarily what people want? In any case, it's going to have an impact. And there is an ethical decision in there that I think you need to make. In all these situations, people will always be unhappy. Some people will be not really happy with any decision that you make. And in any case, you're going to have an impact on the selection, for example, bias in this case. I think it's important to consider different angles and not just let the AI run by itself. But at the same time, I think it's important not to overdo it. I think we have seen examples recently of companies that try to overdo it, and clearly it was also not right. I think the most recent example that was obviously wrong was from Google. Google, when they did Gemini images, they tried to be very diverse and inclusive with their imagery, but clearly they didn't get it right. For example, if you ask people for, if you ask Gemini for photos of In this case, for example, it was some very kind of like critical moments in history, like I want to see pictures of Nazi soldiers. And because Gemini does everything, including people from all different ethnicities and races, they include also people from color or like people from Asia, like dress as Nazi soldiers, which was clearly not very tasteful and not also representative of what happened during that period of history. So these dilemmas are complicated, they're complex. I think we're learning as we go. What I think is important is in any marketing team, in any business, to consider different perspectives and make sure that you are choosing a strategy and you're choosing a direction, knowing where you're going. Where you're going is not going to be perfect, but at least you need to be confident that it's the best alternative or like the best possible solution.
Thank you so much. Really important and a very good, painful example. Alan, can I just briefly come back to you before I come to other panelists? You made an important point that needs to be contextualized. You mentioned a trade-off between speed versus result.
Yeah,
sorry, it would be trade-off speed versus result.
Yeah, we're always making those trade-offs, and part of the risks are that you not only do the wrong thing, but you take too long to do it, or you deliver it at the wrong time frame or in the wrong way. And we're constantly trying to look at operational risks and delivery risk. Operational risk, it does something wrong, and we can't allow that, and we'll keep working and testing until we get it right. Delivery risk is we have to do it within a time frame that makes sense for our environment. In some cases, they may be very short timeframes, milliseconds or less. In other cases, it needs to be done by the big event next Friday or released before our competitor or something. We've always got those kinds of tensions that we're trying to play against and playing off those risks. What happens if I do? What happens if I don't? And I think the challenge for us from an ethical point of view is putting a set of value frameworks around that makes sense in the context in which we're trying to make those decisions. I think Gaston's examples are interesting ones. They're also indicative of what happens in a very pressured environment where you try to do something to impress a market that has some very tight demands on the time frame in which you need to release things. And part of the challenge we face in the digital world we're in right now is it's moving so fast. People are sometimes making very poor choices about what to release when because of the external pressures they feel.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. Because I know that you made the important point that as AI evolves at speed, the definitions of ethics is also evolving. Can you share with us a little bit more about the challenges that this creates?
Yeah, so as AI is evolving, the definition of the ethics is also evolving, right? Essentially, every industry is different. As Gaston said, right? In retail, it's not life-threatening, but it also impact to the human, the day-to-day activities. Whereas in healthcare is life-threatening. So essentially, some of the standards, some of the compliances that healthcare is lacking right now in terms of digital technologies are undefined. And then it is being utilized in AI, and then those ethics are also being undefined. So how, let's say, if you go into the prescriptions and AI prescribed it, right, it's not by the actual doctor. Even the physicians are using those AI, and they have to decide upon whether you go to the Copilot, or if you go to ChatGPT, they have a different models and different way of prescriptions. How would you decide, right? Based on the judgment of the physician. So, and all of this decision impacts the kind of health of the patients. So, this decision-making process needs to be streamlined based on the evolving criteria of the ethics, which particular tool is specialized on what, and then tool needs to provide, like if you go in a pack of cigarette, it has a warning, right? Be caution when you smoke. And those warnings are not there yet in AI technologies. So I think we will be there. We are not there yet because the ethics are evolving.
Thank you so much. We spoke about some of the paradoxes relating to ethical AI, such as personalization. When is personalization to you beneficial and when is it actually restricting your choices? Can you tell us a bit more about these paradoxes and how leaders can solve these challenges? Ange, can I come to you first on that?
Yeah, no problem. So personalization, this is one of my favorite topics. So most senior leaders will say that when it comes to personalization, more is more. And I can definitely say that more is not more. So some examples of when, there's a whole bunch of examples, I'll quickly just fly through them. So there's annoying personalization, which is telling you about accommodation that you might want to buy, about a trip to Rome that you did 2 months ago. So that's just annoying. You don't want to hear about it. There's creepy personalization. So that would be where I had an organization say to me the other day that they thought from the data they had, they could identify someone's LGBT status and then could then tailor the advertisements around that particular status, which I would say in most cases, people just don't want and find really creepy. You've then got sort of creepy and outing people. Oh, sorry, I'll go to creepy and illegal. So creepy and illegal was Netflix. So in 2018, Netflix was giving recommendations for TV shows and movies based upon a viewer's previous viewing. And what was happening was people were previously viewing shows and movies that were based upon a certain ethnic minority. And then all of the recommendations were also of that ethnic minority. And the group that identified it took to Netflix and said, this is not on, we should go to court. Yeah, I need you to stop this. And Netflix agreed. So Netflix will now inject diversity into the recommendations, not because they think you're going to watch it, but because of that particular case. Then we've got creepy where people get outed. So think about the jeweler who sells a bracelet to Jack and Jill, married couple, sells it to Jack. And Jack thinks, it's great, love the bracelet. Anyway, the jeweler sends home a catalogue saying, we know that you bought this bracelet a little while ago. Is there anything else on the catalogue you'd like to buy? But Jack doesn't pick up that letter. That letter's picked up by Jill, and she's wondering, where on earth is this bracelet? And it's obviously gone to somebody that's potentially not Jill. It's gone to maybe Jack's other friend. And then another example would be the telephone company, which said that they were going to give cheaper phone calls to your top 5 dialed numbers. So the phone company sends this home. Jill doesn't pick it up, unfortunately. Jack picks it up, and Jack looks at who Jill's been calling the most, and it turns out it's his mate, Jimmy, and starts to think, why on earth is my wife calling Jimmy quite so much, even more than she's calling me? So that's where the creepiness actually starts outing people, and those guys really don't want that. And then I think there's other things. So that's all the conscious stuff, and then there's unconscious stuff. So anytime you've been tricked into buying something, so for example, I got tricked into buying a very expensive visa for my daughter when really it should have been free on the Aussie website. But also been tricked into potentially buying ChatGPT solutions when, again, if I go through the correct vendor, ChatGPT is free. So I shouldn't have been being tricked into being charged to those. So you might be unconscious and then you become conscious of it. And then I think the other thing is just to think about where your views are coming from. If you're worried about global warming, or if you're particularly worried about the conflict that's going on in the Middle East, or particularly worried about something, try and have a think, where is this worry coming from? And are you being unduly influenced by something or some things? And what are those things? Because I think that is probably the more worrying bit is the creepiness, which changes the way we think about things, and we are completely unconscious to it.
Thank you. Really, really useful. Because you mentioned the issue of the impact of AI when it comes to the supply chain and that global connected ecosystem today, and the end-to-end risk because of all of that. Can you tell us a little bit more about the steps that leaders can take to mitigate this major challenge that we have when it comes to supply chain and that globally connected ecosystem we now have?
Yeah, so in today's world, right, everything is connected, right? If you look at the supply chain, the user doesn't know where it is being manufactured, where it is being retailed, how it is being priced, right? It's a fundamental issue. No retailer would release that information. And then you start selling because people are able to spend, right? In one particular area at a different price, and one particular area in a different price, right? How ethical it is, those statistics, would you be doing it? Yeah. So if you go other way around, because in Africa people are, it's a, you want to sell the drugs at the lower cost, because your intentions are good, but the same drugs are being sold at the higher price in United States. Maybe the reasons is behind the compliance is behind the process they have to follow. But the question is that those statistics, those AI, how we need to leverage it. This is one example. There are so many of them that, when we switch over from, because the AI is suggesting that, okay, the cost is lower in certain part of the world, in Asia, right? But they don't look at the quality of the people and the working conditions of that particular locations, right? Because their algorithms and their learning is based on the cost. So I think those needs to be straightened out. That those needs to be kind of processed, and then look in the perspective of the all the dimensions that can affect in the supply chain.
Thank you so much. Alan, you mentioned before the important issue of what makes the decisions and who has insight when it comes to automation. And I think one of the examples you shared was in the area of HR and recruitment. Could we delve into that a little bit more, please?
Yes. A lot of the comments we've been making are about the way in which we're changing perception of the world in a digital environment in which information is becoming more easily accessible and flows more readily. And I think we work in a very different way in a world where there's a sort of data abundance as opposed to a data scarcity. In a pre-digital world or the early digital world, we were trying to find gateways and access to information. Now the information is everywhere, and our challenge is a different one. It's one of, is this information truthful? Where did it come from? Who owns it? Am I allowed to use it? We've got a whole different set of questions now about the information that we're able to access from many different places, including, is somebody trying to influence me? And if we take examples like HR, where we're constantly trying to collect information, take something like recruitment, where we get a whole bunch of applications for a post, and it's relatively straightforward these days to run some sort of automated system across these applications to try to filter them out to decide who we want to interview. And many organizations do this. The question then comes, what decision making should be taken by those systems on, for example, who's appropriate for this role? Now, some of those can be very straightforward in terms of there are certain criteria for the job. Do they meet that criteria? And some of those are fairly straightforward in they do or they don't. They must have a degree. Okay, do they have a degree? Then if they've said they've got a degree, can we prove they've got the degree? Is there some digital certification I can go validate? Or if it comes from a certain university, do I search their website or their background database to make sure they've got that degree? There's those sorts of things that we can begin to look at. But other things are much more of a gray area that says it's an opinion or it's an experience base that may or may not be appropriate for this role. And that's where we get ourselves into much more difficulty using automated systems. The best we are doing right now is trying to surface those questions and allow a human to intervene. But even the way we surface that information for the human to make decisions when they're overwhelmed with 100 applications or 1,000 applications or 10,000 applications, how do we do that so they can do it quickly and efficiently, but also without the bias and the other sorts of things that we know exist in these systems? So we've got ourselves into really tricky waters right now as we decide where that automation fits, where it supports human decision-making, and even how we present that information so that human decision-making isn't overly influenced by what we do.
Very interesting, incredibly tricky. Thank you so much. Gaston, I believe it said that most laws are local except in the digital realm. How have AI regulations, legislations, and standards evolved over the previous 18 months? And what does it mean for organizations?
So I think regulations in general have an effect, but perhaps it's not immediately seen by most companies. And I think that's the issue that we're having at the moment, not just with AI, but with every single new technology. I think most of the regulations come too late. Currently, we're seeing, for example, some regulations happening in the mobile space. It's just like 10 years late. At the moment, like the app stores are already quite defined. None of that is going to really have a massive effect. I think it's a tricky balance. What I see at the moment is some markets, like for example, the European Union decided to go full on when it comes to regulation. I think in principle, a lot of those regulations make sense. However, the impact that it's having is basically a lot of startups are now moving out of the European Union, and that innovation is happening in other markets, emerging markets, the US, markets that basically allow more flexibility. And in the end, I think what you see is that in certain cases, regulation, unless it's a coordinated global approach, makes very little impact in the short term and long term. I think we live in a globalized world. I think it was mentioned before, like we're all interconnected. So I think my hope is really that when it comes to high risk AI, there is a global agreement around what should be stopped and not allowed to happen.
And that definition of high risk AI is obviously tricky in its own right. So thank you very much indeed. Vikas, may I come to you as well? Particularly, you talked about supply chains and so on. How do we understand the laws when it comes to the digital realm, and how can we, with all those regulations and legislation standards, evolve when it comes to AI? What does it mean? What do we need to do?
Yeah, look, Emma, you know, the more data you have, more intelligence you have, right? All of the government is fighting because the bigger companies have an advantage because they have they have data, they have personalized data, like your cell phone, right? Google has data, Apple has data, but the small businesses, they don't. Okay, so they are losing that competitive edge in the AI world, right? So government is also fighting in terms of coming out with the regulations that the small businesses should get the fair advantage of the AI technology. Okay, all across the world, right? So same with the supply chain data. When we are evolving, there are more data, more transparency available, right? And one of the key reasons that there is a trade war, at least in the United States, with China, because they are not transparent. And until they bring the transparency about as I was mentioning, the quality of the workplace, right? Versus the cost, the conditions, right? And things like that, it's not going anywhere. So essentially, government will come up with this trade restrictions, more regulations, more transparent way of doing the businesses all across the globe.
Thank you so much. Ange, can I come to you? Who's going to gain from AI and who's going to lose out? And how should society mitigate those losses, or even that everyone can gain? Really tricky. Where are the winners and where are the losers? How can we mitigate as a society?
For sure. So if you listen to Forbes, they certainly say that the rich will be richer and the poor will be poorer as a result of AI and ML. And as an example, if you took the 2.2 million people in the United Kingdom who are employed to drive a car, if we then automate all of those vehicles, what happens to those 2.2 million drivers? Are they going to become AI ML coders? Probably not. Are they going to be able to identify and then execute instances of artificial intelligence? Maybe. Human in the loop, which Alan mentioned, that's definitely something they probably could do. So that's supporting AI. But I think the bigger thing for us to think about is we're in our roles, generally since we've been in our roles for almost 20 years for me, I've always been thinking, how can I make this more effective, more efficient, and how can I influence everyone to my way of thinking so that I can get exactly what I want done? But the thing is, AI will help us do that. But I think that we need to just pause and think, actually, are we all better off if everything's faster, more effective, and I'm able to influence large groups of people? Is that best ultimately for me? Is it best for our country? Is it best for our society? And I think that's a really interesting question. And just one example, looking at that, Dr. Vikas talked about Africa. So one of the examples of Africa, I remember going to one of the wine farms, and there was about 10 people raking leaves and using manual tools to shape the lawn and all the rest of it. And I looked at it, I thought, why aren't they just using leaf blowers and edge cutters and, you know, modern gardening tools? And then I sort of thought about it further, and, you know, the wine farm was doing job creation. It was really important that they were employing a certain number of people to do the garden. And actually, if they had the ride-on mower, the edge cutter, and the rest of those technology tools, they wouldn't have needed as many people. So I know that's perhaps not the right way of thinking, but I think that's what we need to start thinking about. Instead of how can I make everything faster and more effective, it's like, okay, what is the longer term potential benefit that we need to be driving at?
Thank you very much indeed. Gaston, can we look at how we mitigate against some of these potential threats? Have you developed a set of responsible AI principles in your organizations that you've been involved in? Obviously, really quite broad industries that you've been involved in. When we look to mitigate, have you been able to develop those responsible AI principles?
Yeah, I think it's such a new area, and I think it's evolving so quickly that having a regulation, especially as a startup, it's a bit, I think, impractical, and it's not really going to deliver maybe the speed that you require, especially if you're a small organization. I think if you're in a large organization, definitely, I think it's important to have some guidelines to ensure agreement. I think in a small organization or a mission-led organization, it's just been very, very confident and also conscious of your company values. I think in our case, for example, with Oddbox, we are a company that is all about doing good for the planet and doing good for, in our case, particularly for farmers and growers. We are rescuing fruits and veg because we want to support local farmers and we don't want to throw away food waste. I think everyone who works at Oddbox knows that's our mission, that's how we behave, that's our culture. So everyone feels empowered in a way to make decisions when it comes to using, for example, some AI technologies. We would never use AI for hiring. Like, just to go back to the discussion that I think you were having with Adam, we would not use it because it just doesn't really represent the best of our brand. I don't feel confident having, for example, an AI persona speaking to candidates. I think the impression that that's going to make to a candidate it's just not the right one. I feel like it doesn't fit with our brand. It might fit with other brands, it might fit with other types of jobs, but it's not right for us. So I think in general, what I would suggest is, of course, if you're a large organization, you will need some level of codifying those guidelines. But if you're a small organization, I think really make sure that you stay true to your values. And then that's going to, I think, answer a lot of questions, allow you to adapt yourself as well to a very rapidly evolving technology.
Thank you. That's really useful. So we're going to come to a question that John Means put into the chat in just a second, but I just want to come back to sort of some of those really important insights and points that you've all very kindly given us over the last sort of 40 minutes or so, and some of those issues that are coming up in our latest Chief Disruptor Insights poll. So I'm just going to bring that up just in case members weren't able to do it earlier. It's just one answer and it's anonymous, but just to get that real understanding from you all as to where are you going, what's important to you, the important principles of ethical AI and transparency, privacy, removing bias and accountability. So if you haven't already, let us know your thoughts on that. We would love you to do that. And the other thing is, I know that some of the members who joined a little bit later weren't able to let us know which of the forthcoming activities they would like to join. So again, we'll put that on the screen so that you can, again, just give us your thoughts in terms of any of the activities that are coming up that you'd like to join. So just while you kindly do those two things, I think let's just quickly look at John's point, which I think has come off the back really of the point that Ange made a little bit earlier. So John's question was, with the increase in companies wanting AI as part of their software, is there a risk that even where it is known that we are buying SaaS solutions, these then get developed to include AI and ML without any further review or knowledge of where, sorry, this was my question, give me a second, of where this is coming from and what it has access to? So that's the chat. Ange, can I come to you because I think that's particularly pertinent for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that with AI and ML, you've got two things. You've got the risk of the individual instance of your AI or ML, and if it is in the SaaS, it's really opaque to you. It's very difficult for you to understand what is going on with that unless you start challenging your supplier. And I think we should all be doing that. The second instance is the systemic risk or the systemic issues that we might be having. And this is where, like, for example, the flash crash that was a little while ago. That flash crash happened because you had a bunch of algorithms that were trading and they all started selling off, and it prompted all of them to sell off, and they sold all the way to the bottom, and then they started climbing back up again because they realized they'd reached the bottom and the only way to go up was to go back up, which is where they went. But I think that is a perfect example of the systemic risk of these multiple algorithms. And you can sort of try and understand both of those risks where the AI ML instances are within your estate. But when they're in SaaS, it gets much more difficult. And yeah, as I mentioned, we should definitely be speaking to our suppliers to try and understand what's going on. And the banks and the financial services amongst us, the regulator will be asking.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ange. So let's talk about data privacy then and security, because they're paramount in the ethical development of AI. As we know, AI systems often require vast amounts of personal data, raising concerns around misuse and breaches. Because how should organizations ensure they have secure data handling? Is this just good data governance, or is there more to it?
Well, today, there are a number of different tools available, okay, to check the data privacy and the security. They are evolving too, and I worked in IBM, so I know IBM has they made it open source available, the Fairness 360, right? It's available to everybody, and they are evolving too, and people are contributing to as well. So the key is that, you need to be aware of, like, before it happens, right? But it happens. Then the second part of that is that you need to monitor it, right? And you need to, provide the much like data robots. You need to have ethical boundaries in your monitoring, right? One of the other tools and technologies is the explanatory tools like Lime, right? It gives you, before you make it in production, it would ensure that, your ML and your AI is up to the ethical standards, right? So some of those things can be utilized. The tools is one way of doing it. Manual reviews, right? The data classification and governance like Colibra or Purview, those kind of tools can assist as well to streamline the process, to make sure that whatever you are producing and delivering it are up to the standards and with the ethical boundaries, securities, privacy, and even the transparencies. At some extent, it's not there yet, but it do address the transparency.
Thank you so much, Alan. What are the ways that you've embedded or have seen organizations embed a culture of ethical AI? Because that's absolutely key to the conversation today.
Yeah, I think there are several key things, and I can pick up a couple of the things that were already said, and particularly what Vikas just talked about. Of course, one of the key ones is about an open conversation inside the organization about what's going on. That transparency is not just transparency of data or with the client, it's transparency inside the organization about the values that the organization has, the mission, how people work together to solve problems. And in particular, when you look at data, which is at the core of many of the challenges around these ethics, I think part of the issue here is one of mentality and philosophy, perhaps, around the use of data. I think 10 years ago, we had a very data-based view. Data was about record keeping, auditing, management, backward-looking view of what was the world like and what does that tell me that I might be able to build on for the future. And we organized and managed our data to do that. I think we then moved to a data-centric world, which was, I want sort of real-time feeds that I can show on a dashboard so I can make better decisions about what's going on. And we tried to create those feeds so that we could display that information in some realistic way and humans could then make decisions. But we're now data-driven. And data-driven is very different. Vikas was talking about some of the implications of that for data. The data itself now needs to be authenticated. We need to understand its provenance. We need to understand its ownership. We need to understand the time frame within which that data is valid. We need to be able to bring different data sources together, which may mean we have new insights, and we have to understand who owns those insights, what our liability is with those, what our responsibilities are. So in this data-driven world, we have a different mentality around what the ethics and responsibilities are with AI. And I think we're only beginning to understand that now with some of the examples we've talked about today.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. A couple of things I'd like to cover. I know we're going to lose a few of you in a second in terms of the fantastic insights you've given us. So if members were to take away one actual strategy that they should put into practice, or a key piece of advice to help them navigate this tricky area, what would you say to them? So a real actual piece of advice or strategy. Gaston, to you first, please.
I think, as I mentioned at the beginning, it all boils down to trust. If you cannot trust a certain technology, if you cannot trust a certain AI strategy, then why do you expect your customers and other people to trust it? Use your common sense. Go back to the basis of any good business, which is building trust with your customers, and make sure that AI is helping that purpose. If not, it's just going to do harm.
Thank you very much indeed. Dr. Vikas, in terms of the actual insight.
Yes, when you generating or using the AI, use the reliable sources of data and have a check. So as Alan was mentioning, right, open discussion, but how it boils down to your synthetic data. There are tools available. There are methods available to test them. The reliability, the transparency of the data, which brings the people, processes, and the technology together. So I think the reliability is the key across what are the sources and how you connect people, process, and technology, and generate your use cases and the test cases with the synthetic data.
Thank you very much indeed. Alan.
I'd just like to enforce again this opening up the conversation, as Vikas was just saying. It's critical that you engage with the people in your organization and have a diverse set of views. The number of times that I've thought I really understood things, and then I talked to somebody who perhaps I didn't even expect to have a view on this, and they've opened up a completely different way of thinking about the problem that I was looking at. It's so critical that we do that, and I think personally for myself, I don't do it enough. I don't have those conversations with enough people, so I'd encourage you to do that as much as you can on these topics.
Thank you. Extremely useful. And to you, that actual insight that members need to be considering.
So I'd say, please try and be aware, and please try and be clever. And that's from both a personal and a work perspective. So try and be aware where your AI is and how it works, and as much as you can understand about it, and then try and be clever. Don't just think, I can make this faster, I can make this more effective. Think, what does this mean for our community? What does this mean for our firm? What does this mean for society in general?
Thank you very much indeed. I know we're going to lose Professor Alan Brown. Thank you so much indeed. And also Gaston today. There was huge insight. I know, Alan, you've kindly written a book recently, which I think we will make sure that we put as part of this, so that we can go into some of the positives, which I know we're going to do a little bit of now, but we're going to lose you in that. So to look at the sort of the wider societal picture, and it'd be great to be able to share that with members. And to Gaston, hugely for your continuing support. Thank you very, very much indeed today to both of you. We're going to just look then at the positives just for the last 5 or so minutes. So let's turn to those positives. We're drawing this session to a conclusion. So AI clearly has the potential to help the public good and to solve some of the huge dilemmas facing the world, such as climate change and inequality. Can you please share your thoughts on how AI can and should promote a fair and ethical society? Please, Ange, can I come to you on that one? How can we actually take this on a positive journey, and how can we utilize it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing you need to think about is your frame of reference and what it is that you're solving for. So you're solving for, so as I said earlier, don't just solve for make it more efficient, make it more effective. Solve for, does this improve the lives of the people in our organisation? Does this improve the lives of the people in our country? Those types of things. So make sure you've got the right solve area that you're looking at. And then I think beyond that, for me, I think the real areas for us to think about is, think about hypotheses. So if you've got a hypothesis as to I really think that the world would be better off if we all have a dating app, just as an example, and just think about all of the knock-on impacts of that. You know, what does that actually do to us as a society? What does that do to me as an individual? And is that really what I want, or is there a smarter way of doing it? And just take that one as an example. If you think about what the dating app is doing, it's really removing or diminishing our ability to be able to have that conversation at the bar, which says, do you come here often? Because the do you come here often, if you're on dating apps, you're never going to ask that, because you're meeting with the person, you know that they're there to meet you because you've just been chatting on the app. So what does it do if I'm no longer able to have that do you come here often chat with people? It's not something that I'm able to do anymore. What does that mean? So I think right sphere of impact, and think about what are the hypotheses for how you can make things better, how you can make lives better, how you can solve some of the things that make things difficult for us, and then go about using AI and ML, using ChatGPT to go and prove or disprove those hypotheses, and then see if there's use cases for you to put AI ML into play.
Thank you so much. Because your thoughts in terms of what can we do, what can we take to make a positive impact?
Yeah, one of the key areas is, as we discussed, Emma, right? The cultural integrity is the key, right? And not in terms of equality, but in terms of equity. So we need to have those equation of the equity within the AI to have a fair game across the globe. And it means like religious, but not only the religious, right? Even with the same religious, there are geolocation, behavioral, and the way of doing the business, right? That should reflect into your AI. So I think the key is that how you are evolving based on the changing dynamics of the equity, right? It matters when it comes down to the fairness within the AI.
Last question to both of you. How can business leaders play a role in this? I'm going to come to both of you, because what can and should business leaders be doing to play a role in what's a very fundamental place?
Yeah, so the business leader, they need to have an appropriate level of the recognition of the AI programs, and then the governance aspect behind the AI, right? So moreover, the bigger companies, they need to understand that they are on the advantage side because they have more data. So essentially, accommodating the innovations and the startup ecosystem is for the better for the bigger companies also, because a lot of even one point of time, those business leaders were startups, right? So essentially nurturing the number of different AI initiatives to understand the ethical dilemma that they are building it and their ideas, right, is the primary aspect that business leaders should look at. So by the means of processes, by the means of governance, by the means of tools, those are the accommodating factor. But essentially, the intention of nurturing those AI initiatives and ethics behind those AI initiatives is the primary aspect, I would say, for the business leaders.
Thank you so much indeed. And how do they get it right?
Yeah, for sure. So I think the first one is understand the risks. So understand the risks of individual AI ML instances, and as I said earlier, understand the risk of the systemic issues that might occur, like the flash crash is a great example. And then once you've understood those risks from an individual sort of systemic, holistic point of view, then make sure you understand where the AI is in your company. And admittedly, it may need to be aggregated up so that you can understand it, because if it's, 1,000 instances within your organization, 1,000 is too difficult for you to manage. So you need to try and group them into patterns so that you can manage them appropriately. And then I'll be putting guardrails in place. Guardrails would be criteria through which you want to manage the estate of AI and ML that's currently in your remit, and make sure you're regularly reviewing it, because things might change. And also looking at what your plans are moving forward. I think that everybody, as soon as ChatGPT got launched, every CEO initiated a massive AI ML program that everyone lent into. some of the use cases that were given were AI, ML, and I think some of the use cases that were given were not. And that's fine. They're all positive. But make sure that those guardrails are helping you make sensible decisions with respect to, do you actually want to implement this AI, ML, and then how can you make sure it's been implemented safely? And senior execs, they're all about tech outage, cyber breach, reg breach, if you're a bank, and achieving strategic objectives. So worry about those things and make sure you're managing the risks around those things with respect to your AI, ML.
Thank you very much. Really, really good way to end today's forum. Thank you both very much indeed. A huge thank you to all of our panelists for an incredibly insightful panel discussion, really broad reaching, but as expected, and really important points that we need to take away and act as much as we can. And a big thank you to our audience for joining us this afternoon, and indeed for those that will then be watching on demand, and to our members as a whole in the Chief Disruptor community.